I'm Dr. Kate Wilber. I'm on the faculty at the Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. I've been in the field of gerontology for a number of years, all of them at USC. I was working in Boston and I came upon a magazine in the early 1970s about a brand new field called gerontology, and a leader in that field, Dr. James Birren. And little did I think that many years in the future I would be sitting here with the privilege of interviewing Dr. Birren. Dr. Birren, what are the central issues in gerontology today?
Oh, I think the central issues of gerontology are very interesting and very dynamic today. People in all countries are living longer, and they're having more active lives, and it's challenging the cultures and the societies. In California, we're calling it the age wave. In Asia, they're calling it the age quake because it's shaking up society. People are living so much longer. Since 1900 and today, we've added more than 30 years to the average life expectancy. When I was a boy, orphans were the big issues. The families broke up by death of one or the other of the parents before the last child left home. Old people were not an issue. They died relatively early. So it's a major concern in society today, what I've called the age quake. So many different aspects. Pensions have been bankrupted because people are living so much longer. You can retire at 62 and live to 102.
Can you tell us how the field of gerontology began?
Well, the study of gerontology emerged after World War II. That's when we became more aware of the increase in life expectancy. Both the Gerontological Society of America and the American Geriatric Society were founded about 1946, and they had meetings. And some of the issues, you see, were coming to be apparent, what we couldn't explain in things. In the Korean War, there was later the men that were hospitalized after the war, and they were late teenagers or early 20s. Many of them had atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis was supposed to be a disease of later life. So that's when gerontology began, and it began, in a sense, with the study of atherosclerosis, heart disease. A foundation in New York, the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation, had a meeting in which they discussed it, and then they said, but issues of aging enter this. And a man from St. Louis, E.V. Cowdery, he was a histologist, published the first comprehensive book on problems of aging, and it attempted to integrate from biology to the social and behavioral sciences.
Please tell us about the creation of the aging section of the National Institute of Mental Health and what the attitude towards aging was back then.
Well, see, my early employment was at the National Institutes of Health, and when I was there, I began to be aware of the out-of-date models we were using about human life. There was a general orientation in mental health that the important things were the things that happened in early life. The psychoanalysts believed that the first 2 or 3 years of life were the important things, and then you developed a scenario that was lived out through the rest of your life. So they were not very much interested in aging. And then when I was there and had a group of colleagues, we attempted to publish a book on, it had to do with mental health, aging, brain physiology, and the social context of people's lives. And it was delayed a year because the biologists didn't want to accept that psychosocial loss in the later years affected one's health. That was just an out-of-date thing. So it took a year to recognize that people who had losses in later life, like the death of a spouse or the death of a child, led to health problems. So there were other examples too. One of the biggest ones was the fact that the history of health began very much with the idea of infectious diseases. And in the early years, let's go back to before World War II, infectious diseases were the primary health threats. It had one cause and usually one cure. Penicillin came in and controlled it. So when we got into the chronic diseases like heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, and other things, we had to shift from an orientation where there was one cause to multiple causes. And today, we believe that the health and the study of gerontology has to recognize multiple causes.
How did you bring yourself and the study of gerontology to USC?
When I was at the National Institutes of Health, we began this little study on aging, and then I had a colleague, Dr. Robert Butler, and we wanted to create a laboratory on aging, looking at mental health and aging, but it was turned down. But then there was public pressure developing, and there was created a National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, which added aging on as a new doorway to life. And then later on, even more pressure developed, public pressure, with the emergence of what I call the age quake or the age wave, led to Congress to create the National Institute on Aging, and that was 1975. But I had joined the faculty at the University of Southern California in 1965. So there was the emergence then of something. And to illustrate some of the issues again, in the early period of time, you had housing for older people as a primary concern. And then we had a meeting in Washington when I was there in 1964. We had the federal housing people and we had the health officials, and we tried to get them to blend health and housing. So we bring health issues into housing communities for older people. The housing people said, oh no, we deal with housing, we don't deal with health. And the health people said, oh no, we don't deal with housing, we just deal with health. See, that's the way it was, the separation. Now there's the integration. The University of California Andrus Gerontology Center, its roots were in some money that was given by Ross Cortese, who developed Leisure World. Leisure World developed as housing for older people. But then there were some problems, and he defaulted on his later gift. But then something else came in that was a new development, the development of the American Association of Retired Persons, now known as AARP. There was a principal of a high school in Los Angeles, Lincoln High School, and when she retired, she got about $60 a month pension, as I remember, and then she joined with the California retired teachers to deal with Sacramento and raise retired teachers' pensions. But then there was growing interest in health issues. In that period of time, in the early 1960s, you couldn't get health insurance in this country if you're over 65. The out-of-date ideas that the health insurance people had was, you're too old. That's not a good risk. We won't make any money from health insurance for people over 65. So Ethel Percy Andrus worked in New York with the New York retired teachers, and they got to say, we will underwrite loss in a health insurance policy if we lose money after the first year. And then they had a man who developed the policy idea, Leonard Davis, and he used some money to promote the idea. Well, what happened in New York was the health insurance for teachers over 65 didn't lose money, it made money. But then teachers across the country wanted health insurance too. So all the teachers' associations got it. The next thing was, well, then the public said, well, if teachers can get health insurance, why can't we? And that led to the creation of the American Association of Retired Persons. And it went on from there. It's now the biggest organization in America, and it's the most widely read newsletter that they publish.
Please tell us how the Leonard Davis School of Gerontology came to be.
The first development was the creation of a center for the study of aging. And then the AARP came in and wanted to honor Ethel Percy Andrus. After all, she grew up in Los Angeles and taught school there. And then after the development of the AARP and the health insurance, Leonard Davis became a very dominant figure in health insurance, and he wanted to leave a legacy, so he pledged $2 million to create the first school of gerontology in the world. And that began, about 1975, and it's something that's growing and spreading.
You've been a transformational leader in the field of gerontology. Can you tell us how this field has changed during the course of your career and how USC has led the change?
There's so many changes that occurred, and one of the things is to look at our out-of-date models of what aging is like. In fact, age doesn't cause anything. Age is just an index to causes. Aging is a kind of a dynamic metaphor that causes these things, but there are plus changes and minus changes with life. And so we have to get beyond the age, which is an index, to the causes. And now one of the things we've come to recognize is the diversity of the older population. There are people that have Alzheimer's disease early or Parkinson's disease, but then we realize they're centenarians. There are some people over 100 who are living alone and independently. I think in California today there are over 150 drivers, licensed car drivers, over the age of 100. So the diversity of the older population was one of the first things we had to recognize in the School of Gerontology, that the population is not they are a stereotype. We can't use that at teenagers. Teenagers are not they. There's differentiation and diversity. So that was one of the early contributions. And now that's being added to by scientific research having to do with the idea that there's more than genetics involved in the course of human life. In fact, there's a new field that's coming in called epigenetics. Epigenetics carries forward the effects that a mother or a father had in shaping the ova or the semen. And so that's a new biological effect on diversity and carry forward in the population. But then the interaction between nature and nurture, what we do, what we eat, how we exercise, and indeed how we interpret our lives. How we interpret our lives and thinking about causality leads to decisions that affect our health and how long we're going to live.
How do you think changes in modern life have affected older people?
Well, many of the changes in modern life are affecting people positively. Certainly, there are many health advances, and I think when my father grew up, he works 6 days a week from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock in the evening. That's changed. So work stress has been reduced. And then I think dietary efficiencies used to be an issue. Again, this is nurture. We went through a period of dietary restrictions. We didn't get the shipment of fruits, citrus fruits in off-season. And there was a study done at the University of California, Berkeley, in the early 1930s, showing that children grew up faster, stronger, taller than children in the rest of the country. Why? Well, the issue was they got food through balanced diets throughout the year. So that was, again, a nurture thing. So one of the emergent issues regarding the well-being of older people is the interaction between environment and their beliefs of the people, as well as the biological background in genetics and epigenetics.
How have ideas in medicine and psychology towards aging changed over your career?
I think several things have emerged regarding older people. The biggest one is, how old is old? When Social Security was first set up, it was thought that age 65 was old. But now, my goodness, people are living much longer, and that's what's damaging our pension and our economy at the moment. We didn't realistically expect that people would be living so much longer than they did before. And also, it's changing the outlook of people's lives. That is, here I am retiring. What am I going to do next? What are my goals? I might live 20 or 30 more years. How am I going to use the gift of long life? That's an emergent issue. And I think more people are interested in writing their life stories, interpreting their lives, and leaving a legacy for their families and also other people. How did I grow up? Where did I grow up? How did I get here? And where am I going from here?
You teach a course called Guided Autobiography. Tell us what guided autobiography is and what its significance is.
Well, I did a book on guided autobiography. This is sort of the manual. And I discovered over the years, beginning about 30 years ago at the University of Southern California, mixing people up in a group, both students and older people, and asking them to walk through their lives. A series of questions were developed. The first one was, what are the branching points in your life? Why did your life flow one way rather than another? And this brought out personal exchanges between people, and that personal exchange primed the other people's memories. Say, oh, that reminds me of something like that happened to me when I was young. Or, oh, well, something turned up, but it had a different effect on me. What were the early effects? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there were early deaths in the family. A parent died, or a sibling died. That was a big issue in the early days, and that caused repercussions. But then I remember saying in a group, the Depression days caused problems. When I was in Chicago growing up, I went downtown, and in Chicago, this would be in the 1930s, veterans were selling apples on the street for a nickel. A nickel could purchase something in those days. They sold it. So those were the veterans' days. But then a woman in my autobiography group said, but I grew up in Iowa, and we had a farm, and we traded things with neighbors, so the Depression didn't affect us very much. But merely talking about the Depression primed the memories of both of these people, and then exchanging them. Another man said he grew up in North Dakota, had to walk over the snow to a one-room schoolhouse about a mile away. Oh, that was different than someone else's story. So sharing your story develops a kind of an intimacy of relationship, and it enriches what you recall, because the other people's memories trigger things that you forgot in your life.
Please talk about your ideas about quality of life for older adults.
Well, the issue of quality of life has to be explored more, because as I indicated, in some countries, in some areas, there's a lot of tension. As, for example, in India, the children are moving to the city to work in the high-tech society, and the older people are left back on the farms without any pension, without any health care. So that's a cultural issue. So to improve the quality of life, we have to bring some things together. I think the emergence of new quality style of retirement housing is going to improve the quality of life. In the past, it was just housing. Now, housing projects are developing that bring in many activities, not only access to health facilities, Tai Chi, brain stimulation, and groups of bringing people together. See, in the past, it might have been symbolic to stay in the house you grew up in and live your life out there. But as you're living your life out in that house as a symbolism of the fact that your parents may have built that house, you may become alone, isolated, the children move away. So moving into a modern retirement community brings with it the association of other people with other people, and telling and sharing life stories and engaging in new activities.
What are the best things that have happened to you in your life?
What is the best thing that has happened to me in my life? I think it's education. It's kept me moving along. I think that some people's lives are like straight arrows. Their father, there was one man I had his father was a doctor, his grandfather was a doctor, and he was a doctor, so he was a straight arrow. And my career has rotated around. I was going to be an engineer, then a school teacher, and then I decided on psychology. And I learned from all of these things, and now I am a member of the American Psychological Association, the American Physiological Society, the American Geriatric Society, and I look at these journals. So the idea is to putting it together. That's what's challenged me. Putting life together. We are organisms. How are we organized? How did we get organized? How do we change with age? There's a new issue, for example, within physiology. A retired professor, a retired president of the American Physiological Society said There were 12 million references online in physiology today. So what the scientists have done, they've taken a piece of the jigsaw puzzle of life, the organism, and run with it. But they don't put the jigsaw puzzle together again. In physiology today, there's an emphasis on integration. How do the immune system, the cardiovascular system, the renal system, the endocrine system, how do they interact? And even more than that, how does the nervous system interact? In the early stages of psychology, psychology was off in a field by itself, but now it's regarded in neuroscience as part of the brain. And the brain in physiology is regarded now as the primary regulatory organ in the body. It regulates our metabolism, our body temperature, our heart rate, our blood pressure, all of these things. So integration is one of the important themes of science. We've gotten so good at taking things apart, but the individual is an individual organism. How did it get started? How did it change with age? How did it develop? These are questions that are getting to be more important. And just one piece of the jigsaw puzzle may be useful, but it doesn't explain the individual life and the well-being of that life.
Is there anything that you think is important that you would like to talk about that I haven't asked about?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I've stressed the idea of out-of-date ideas. Science has out-of-date ideas, as I indicated, how chronic disease was a problem because they couldn't find just one cause. And there was a lot of rejection of the ideas of stress affecting heart disease and personal experience affecting heart disease. So we as individuals have out-of-date ideas about life. What are our out-of-date ideas? Well, one of them, for example, was exercise. When I was a boy, my grandparents didn't exercise. Exercise was not good for you. Today, exercise is regarded as an important feature of later life. And exercise interacts with diet. So there's another issue. So we have within us out-of-date ideas that we have to bring up to date. What is it that made me get interested in this field? I think it was curiosity. Curiosity. I attended the first meeting of the Gerontological Society. It was supposed to meet a year earlier, but it met in February 1948 in a hotel in New York City. And I was curious about some things. During World War II, I was working for the Naval Medical Research Institute, and we found some data that indicated that men's strength went down with age. How come? Why does strength go down with age? Well, that was in the back of my mind, and it led to other questions like that. Why do these things change? And we can't go back to stereotypes. We have to keep an open mind about the causes. One of the things that interests me in education today is the fact that when you receive a degree, whether it's a bachelor's degree or a master's or a doctorate, the field seems to be somewhat closed, when actually there's going to be more changes after you get your degree than there were before. The expansion of science is just expanding so much. One of the things that's useful in thinking, in personal thinking, professional thinking, scientific thinking, is divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Convergent thinking is where there's one cause, one effect, But then divergent thinking said, well, maybe there'll be many causes, and if so, this. And then if you're making a decision, if I make the decision, there would be this outcome. If I make another decision, this would be the outcome. So having a balance between convergent and divergent thinking is useful in our personal lives as well as in our professional and academic lives. One of the big words that I want to use is change. Change in science, change in people's lives. And here we have a book, the Handbook of the Psychology of Aging, the 6th edition. How much this field has changed since it first began. Just one little illustration. In the early days of memory, there was a German psychologist in the late 1800s. He gave people lists of nonsense syllables and asked them later to remember which ones they were. And you had a curve that came down like that. And that was our view of memory. So with time, your memory goes down like that. Now, new studies of memory show some kinds of memories may improve with age, like memories for pictures go up. Maybe you form associations with words. So that's a new look at memory. And for example, vocabulary. By the time we're 60, our vocabulary is double from the time when we left college. May go up to something like 45 to 50,000 words from 25 to 27,000 words. So many things go up with age. That's a change. So this book, in its many chapters, captures the change. But keep an open mind. There's going to be more change in the future.